the wind never stopped in the town of Drybell. It scraped against the tin roofs and coiled through barbed wire, stirring up the dust that coated everything in pale, chalky layers. People didn't come to Drybell for anything but silence, or to be forgotten. Most of the houses leaned, tired and paintless, lining a single road that bled into desert scrub. The horizon boiled under heat. No one knew why Micah Thorne had returned. 12 years earlier, his mother had disappeared in the rocks west of town, not far from the place the old-timers still called Wound Hollow. It had been ruled an accident. The sheriff had said the terrain was treacherous, the heat deadly. But no body had been found. No footprints leading away. Just a pickup truck left on the ridge, the door open, keys still in the ignition. And Micah, barely a teen, had been sent away to live with a distant aunt in Nevada. He hadn't come back since. Now, at 31, he drove an aging Dodge through town with the windows down and no music playing. His arms were lean, sunburnt. A tattoo of a compass rose faded on his forearm. He parked in front of his mother's old trailer, now sagging slightly on cinder blocks at the edge of town. The door squealed when he opened it, like something waking up. Inside, it was still furnished. A dusty calendar from 2013 hung beside the fridge. The couch sagged in the middle like a hammock. On the table lay a cracked, leather-bound journal, one Micah didn't recognize. It hadn't been there when he left. He was sure of it. The name scrawled on the inside cover wasn't his mother's. Maribel Thorne never left. She shed her voice, her skin, and her name. To find her, follow the echo. But tread lightly. What wears a name does not forget. Micah stared at the words. A memory twitched in the back of his mind. His mother whispering lullabies in an old tongue, her eyes always glancing toward the window after sundown. Warning signs drawn in chalk around the porch. Her warnings about walking near the cliffs at night. And the dream. He'd had it every year since her disappearance. Standing at the edge of a canyon, something behind him wearing her face, smiling wrong. He flipped to the next page. They called them Chindi once. Echoes of hate, of grief, of what we shed and bury. But some say the real ones, the oldest ones, were us. They slip into hollows left by our pain. Skinwalkers, yes, but not just skin. They wear stories. Micah closed the book. His jaw clenched. He should leave. The same part of him knew that. Instead, he stayed. Let me know when you're ready for the next section, or if you'd like me to continue automatically. You said, all in one go, automatically. ChatGPT said, updated save memory. Great. I'll begin the full horror story sequel now. The story will unfold directly here in the chat. In longer sections, 5,000 characters each, with a different protagonist and setting, but staying true to the style and mythos established in Ash and Echoes. No further prompting needed. I'll write continuously until the story reaches approximately 85,000 characters. Here we go. Beneath the black pines, the town of White Hollow wasn't on most maps. It sat high in the mountains of northern New Mexico, cradled between ridgelines like something the forest had forgotten to swallow. Snow clung to the pine needles, even in June, and the wind carried a kind of hush, the sound of something holding its breath. Colton Reyes hadn't been back since he was 17. That was 15 years ago when his mother died and he left the valley without looking back. Now he was 32, burned out from his job as a fireline investigator, and the only reason he returned was a letter. No stamp, no sender. Just a folded page tucked into his mailbox back in Santa Fe. Come home. She's not gone. The woods remember. There was no signature, but he recognized the handwriting. His sister's. Sarah had gone missing the same winter their mother died. Colton was told she'd run off, like so many teenagers from broken places. There had been search parties, rumors, whispers about the woods being haunted, cursed. But Colton hadn't believed in any of that. Not then. Now, with the mountains looming outside the windshield of his rented Jeep, he wasn't so sure. White Hollow was smaller than he remembered. Only one gas station, 2 stop signs, and the same diner still squatting under a rusted tin awning. Most of the storefronts were shuttered. The church bell tower was half collapsed, the wood beneath scorched black. And his childhood home? Still standing, somehow. The Reyes cabin sat at the edge of the forest, dark as pitch, windows like dead eyes. He didn't go there first. Instead, Colton parked behind the diner and walked the pine trail that curved up toward Old Wash Creek. The trees stood tall, their bark split and charred in places, reminders of the great fire that tore through here when he was 15. The fire that killed their mother. That's what he'd been told. He stopped where the trail narrowed, breath fogging. The trees were too quiet, and the deeper he walked, the more the silence grew dense, like the forest was pressing against him, listening. Then he heard it, a voice. Finn. Familiar. Colt. He turned, eyes scanning the trees. Nothing. A trick of the wind, maybe. He shook it off and kept moving until the creek came into view, just a trickle now, barely audible over the dry hush of pine needles. That's when he saw the totems. Dozens of them, hanging from the trees, twine and bone, carved sticks with notches, animal skins stretched like paper across branches. He stepped closer. One of them wore a button from his sister's denim jacket. Colton reached for it, and the woods whispered again. She's not gone. Not all the way. The fire line and the silence. He spent the night in the old cabin. Dust covered everything, but nothing had been touched. The table where their mother used to read tarot. The iron stove with its cracked door. Even Sarah's room looked frozen in time. Posters still peeling from the walls. Her sketchbooks stacked neatly on the desk. Colton didn't sleep. He sat by the fireplace with a bottle of mezcal, reading the journal he found in her room. The leather was cracked, pages weathered with age and damp, but the ink had held. The entries were scattered, disjointed. Most weren't dated. Some were just sketches. Figures with too many limbs, mouths where eyes should be. Others were lines repeated again and again. He wears their skin. Smoke is the first sign. Don't answer if it sounds like family. Colton flipped ahead. One page stopped him cold. I followed her into the burn zone. She had Mom's voice, but her feet didn't leave tracks. He closed the book and leaned back, the mezcal burning in his throat. The fire had long since gone out. Cold crept through the floorboards like mold. He heard scratching, not inside from the woods, outside the cabin. Slow, rhythmic, as if something dragged nails across bark. Colton grabbed the flashlight and his hunting knife, moved to the front door, and opened a crack. Pine shadows danced in the beam of light. The scratching stopped, but across the yard, just before the tree line, something moved. A shape, tall, wrong, leaned against the pine. It were clothes, a flannel shirt, jeans. Colton's breath caught. It was Sarah's outfit, but the face wasn't finished. Skin stretched too tight, mouth pulled into a grin that didn't blink, and the eyes, hollow, glossy black like obsidian. It raised its arm and waved. Colton slammed the door and bolted it. The journal was still open on the floor. Don't let it wear her too long. The longer it does, the harder it is to pull her out. He didn't sleep that night either. Crows in the chimney at dawn, he found the footprints. Deep in the frost-covered ground, leading from the tree line to the porch. Barefoot, but too large to be Sarah's. Too heavy. Whatever walked on them had weight and purpose. Colton grabbed the journal, a flare gun from the shed, and the Polaroid camera from Sarah's room. Then he followed the tracks. They led through the forest, up the old wash, and past the rusted remains of the collapsed mining tunnel, a place the kids had always called the mouth. His mother used to warn them away from it, said the land there didn't forget pain. At the edge of the mouth, the footprint split. One trail veered left toward the gorge. The other circled back, as if something had doubled behind him. Colton turned. He wasn't alone. 10 feet away, a figure stood among the trees. It was his mother, exactly as she'd looked the day she died, soot-streaked, red scarf around her neck, eyes wide and glassy. She didn't move, just stared. Colton's knees nearly buckled. "Mom," she smiled, but the smile was wrong, too slow, like someone trying to remember how. "You found your way back," she said. Her voice echoed. He stepped back, hand tightening on the flare gun. "I saw your body," he whispered. She took a step forward. "Did you?" The woods groaned behind her. The trees bent. He fired the flare. It burst in red light, flaring across the forest. The figure vanished. Only scorched bark remained, and a feather. Black, soaked in something thick. Colton fell to his knees. He realized he'd been crying, and above him, the crows began to scream. Emberglass Colton didn't remember getting back to the cabin. His hand was scraped, his knees bloodied from where he'd fallen near the ridge. The Polaroid camera hung from his neck like a noose, and when he checked the film slot, he found one photo already developed. It showed the figure in the woods, but in the photograph, it wasn't his mother. It was Sarah, and her mouth had been sewn shut with twine. He threw up behind the woodshed. The taste of bile and smoke filled his throat. When he stood, the world tilted. The trees seemed too tall now, the cabin too far. His hands shook as he opened the journal again. A new entry had appeared. It can't lie unless it wears someone you love. That's the only way in. That's the rule. He looked at the photo again. Sarah's eyes were wide, pleading. That night, he set wards around the cabin. Not real wards, just salt circles, borrowed rituals from books he never fully believed in. But it gave him something to do, something to hold on to. The fear clawed at the edge of his mind, demanding belief. And when the fire died low, the whispers returned. You left her. Colton gripped the journal. You're not her. She waited. She watched you leave. She burned. He shut his eyes. Sarah's not gone. The voice laughed, a chorus of it, not one but dozens, as if the woods had mouths. No, she's still here, but not all the way. Then silence, and something moved in the chimney. Colton stared up as flakes of soot drifted into the hearth. Then a hand, small, blistered, clutching a broken matchstick, reached out from the ash. He didn't run. He knelt and whispered, Sarah. The hand trembled, then it pulled back. The journal fell open on the floor beside him, pages flipping fast. Then it stopped. She's trapped in the emberglass. Find a place that never burned. Bring her name. Bring fire. Colton didn't sleep. He packed, and just before dawn, he set out for the place he swore he'd never return to, the heart of the fire line, where the ground still smoked after 15 years. The charred hollow, the forest, changed the deeper he went. The trees blackened, the needles vanished, and the wind didn't howl. It whistled through holes in bark and bone strung between branches. Colton hiked for hours. By midday, he found the clearing. Nothing grew here. The fire had hollowed the land like a shell, left it scorched and brittle. At the center stood a cairn, stones stacked around a blackened post. Atop it sat something that made his chest seize. Ayar, glass, cracked and frosted. Inside it, ash, and floating above the ash, a tiny scrap of denim. He stepped closer. The temperature dropped. He could see his breath again, fogging the air like ghosts. The jar pulsed. The wind changed, and something rose from the ash. Not a figure, not fully, a shimmer, the shape of a girl, unfinished, as if drawn in charcoal and smoke. Sarah, Colton whispered. The shape turned. Its mouth opened, but no sound came. Instead, the glass fogged with frost. Letters scrawled from the inside. Name me. Burn the lie. He lit a match. Held it to the denim. The flames caught, and the wood screamed. The jar shattered. The shimmer collapsed. Wind howled like sirens through the trees. And a figure exploded from the shadows, tall, hollow-eyed, wrapped in stolen skin. It wore his face. Colton staggered back. The thing opened its mouth. A dozen voices spilled out. Some his, some Sarah's, some he didn't recognize. Too late. It hissed. But Colton stood firm. I know what you are. He held up the journal. And I know your name. He spoke it. A word that wasn't a word. One that tasted of smoke and grief and endings. The thing recoiled. Its form unraveled. Faces peeling away like wet paper. The woods convulsed. Colton threw the journal into the fire. The scream that followed wasn't human. And when the light returned, Sarah stood at the center of the clearing. Alive, but not untouched. Her bones, remember Sarah, didn't speak for a long time. Colton brought her back to the cabin, cleaned the soot from her skin, fed her broth, and waited. That night, she finally looked at him. You shouldn't have come. He smiled, tears catching in the lines of his face. I couldn't stay away. She nodded, then whispered, it's still out there. Colton's stomach sank. I ended it. Sarah shook her head. You burned its skin, not its name. He froze. Outside, the woods groaned. The trees bent just slightly. The wind spoke again, not in voices, but in laughter. And Colton realized what the journal had never told him. Skinwalkers don't die when you burn them. They only move. To the next name. To the next face. And somewhere, deep beneath the black pines, something waited. Still wearing a smile. Still whispering her name. The iron lungs of Shelter Hill miles east, past the mountains where the pine fields turned silver and fogstone. There sat a mining town called Shelter Hill, abandoned since 1952 after a cave-in swallowed the lower district. Locals claim the town still breathed through its hollowed lungs, exhaling rust and secrets when a moon cut just right across the slag heaps. Harper Wynn didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in patterns. As a folklorist and cultural anthropologist, she hunted echoes, recurring motifs in regional myths. She'd mapped sightings of skinwalkers, wendigos, changelings, and mimics. The overlap fascinated her. How stories changed shape, traveled across cultures, and carried something predatory beneath the surface of folklore. When she received Colton's recorded journal, mailed anonymously, warped by static and age, she recognized the cadence of the voice. Not just him, the thing wearing him. It whispered in Navajo, then shifted to something older. The tape ended with a name scratched into plastic, Namada. She traced it to Shelter Hill. The stories there were sparse, stitched from cold dust and miners' prayers. But the pattern emerged. 1899, a mother claimed her son returned from the mine, not breathing right. 1912, 2 miners disappeared, found weeks later inside a sealed tunnel, skin peeled, lungs missing. 1947, a preacher hung himself after claiming the church's reflection spoke back. The same word was etched into every surviving surface from those events. Namada. Harper descended into Shelter Hill alone, carrying a backpack of gear, camera, salt, field recorder, and her great-grandmother's prayer stone wrapped in lambskin. The sun hung heavy as an anvil over the collapsed town. A rusted cart track pointed downward into the bones of the mine. She entered just after dusk. The air smelled like metal and mildew. Her breath steamed, though it was summer. And in the darkness, something coughed. Not echoed, not wind. Coughed. She flicked on her recorder. Day 1, Shelter Hill descent. Signs of human presence. Auditory anomaly detected. The coughing continued. It was hers, but she hadn't coughed. She didn't know yet. The mine had mirrors, not made of glass, but of air and old names. And in this place, breath could be borrowed. The crawl beneath names by the second shaft, Harper's flashlight dimmed, not from lack of battery, but smothering. The dark here didn't resist light. It swallowed it like hunger. Her prayer stone warmed against her chest. Voices rose from the walls. Not screams, not whispers. Conversations. Domestic. Intimate. Did you finish your lunch, baby? You smell like coal again. They're watching me from the slag pit. I saw their teeth. Harper shook her head, focused. It wasn't real. Echoes. Trauma burn off. Residual hauntings from methane hallucinations. Maybe, but the 4th tunnel bent wrong. It looped back into itself, stone folding like skin. And waiting there was a figure, bent, genderless, draped in miner's garb. Its face was papered over in mining tags. One read, Wynn Joseph, her great-grandfather. He'd vanished in 1931. The thing wore his posture, stumbled like he did in old photos. She whispered his name. The tags peeled from its face. Beneath was her own, but stitched with coal seam veins and hollow eye sockets. It spoke her voice. You were always meant to descend. You have your mother's grief. Harper ran. The mine twisted. Every corridor led to another version of her. Older, younger, dying, smiling. Some knelt and prayed. Some screamed. One crawled on all fours, spine arched unnaturally. She dropped the camera, grabbed the prayer stone, pressed it to her forehead, and cried out in her grandmother's dialect. A wall cracked. A tunnel collapsed. And daylight poured through a tear in the ceiling. She clawed upward, slipping on soot and broken bones, dragging herself out through the slag heap. Harper didn't stop running until she reached the motel 3 miles out. And when she opened her backpack to retrieve her journal, it was gone. In its place, a photograph of her standing inside the mine, smiling. But she'd never posed for it. And behind her in the photo, a figure was reaching for her throat. 34,000 characters so far. Continuing, dust psalms the photograph aged overnight. It had been glossy when she found it. Now its edges curled, and a layer of dust settled over its surface no matter how often she wiped it. Harper scanned it, uploaded it to her private archive, and ran facial analysis. The software glitched. Not crashed, glitched. It began naming her in multiple languages. Herself, daughter, stranger, Namada. And the metadata encoded in the image listed a creation date, January 12th, 2049. 20 years in the future. That night, the motel room's mirror fog from the inside. She stood in front of it, breath held. The words appeared. "You are the archive. You carry the hollow. The name is a hunger." The power flickered. Her phone rang. Unknown caller. She answered. A dozen versions of her own voice spoke at once. "We need to go deeper." Click. Deadline. The language of forgotten things. Harper traced the roots of the word Namada across dead languages. It didn't appear in traditional Navajo, though it mimicked its cadence, but in older, fragmented linguistic relics. Hakama, proto-known, deeper still into oral tradition and unrecorded root sounds. It emerged in pieces. She found a reference in a cracked clay bowl at the University of Santa Fe's private collection. A symbol repeated 5 times. Below it, the etched translation, according to Dr. Helen Yates' notes, that which speaks only when worn. Skinwalkers didn't just wear bodies. They wore memory. They wore potential. Paths never walked, grief never voiced. Harper realized the echo wasn't limited to one body, or even one town. Namada was a pattern that migrated. It took root in trauma and ripened in silence. And now it had her name. It had Joseph Wynn's body. It had Colton's last voice recording, still circling static in her inbox. The next place wasn't a mine. It was a church. She drove 6 hours north to a chapel built from black stone in a settlement that didn't appear on any modern map. The congregation had long since burned, but something there waited in the pews, waiting to be named. The midnight liturgy of the chapel had no address. No path but the broken trail Harper followed by instinct, through scraggly pinyon trees and scorched hills where birds fell silent and wind seemed reluctant to pass. The structure jutted from the earth like a black tooth, obsidian stone, soot-streaked, half-buried in dead vines. No cross adorned its peak, only a circle carved into the steeple, surrounded by notches. 5 small, uneven cuts that pulsed faintly when she approached. Inside, pews lay overturned, hymnals half-rotted. The altar was a slab of slate covered in ash. Something had once burned here for years. Wax, maybe? Flesh, possibly. The air was colder than outside. Not a natural cold. The kind found in morgues and old wounds. Harper stepped carefully down the center aisle, every footfall stirring up motes of dust that moved like thought. She set her satchel down and withdrew her field mic, whispering into it. Audio journal, day 6. Entered the church referenced in Black Mine Archives and Dr. Yates' apocryphal notes. Smells like sulfur and burnt hair. There are carvings on the back walls, but they're inverted like they were etched from the other side. A noise echoed from the confessional booth, something between a sob and a hiss. She raised her flashlight. Slowly, she opened the booth. Empty, but carved into the seat where a priest might have sat were more words. Deeply scored. Echo me. Fill the hollow. She stepped back. Her recorder clicked. Not on its own. She hadn't pressed anything. Her voice spoke. From the recorder. Please, it begged. Please put me on again. Another voice answered. She doesn't know what she carries. The air thickened. Her flashlight flickered, then died. Darkness pressed in, and in that silence Harper heard footsteps, not echoing, but perfectly paced to hers behind her. She turned. No one, but the pews were now full. Figures sat there, unmoving, shaped like people, clothed like townsfolk. But their faces were paper masks, stitched photos of her own expressions from childhood, adolescence, the woman she'd become. Every mask wore her. The frontmost figure rose and reached for her. Harper slammed the recorder to the floor. "No more," she shouted, and everything went still. The pews emptied. The masks curled inward like leaves on a fire. And on the altar now stood a new object, a mirror. But when she looked into it, she saw not her face, but Colton's. And behind him, the mind. The reflection blinked. "Follow the breath, win," it said. Then the mirror shattered from the inside. The arches beneath the Rook's Spine mountain range had no marked trails. Just limestone ridges and veins of old obsidian, where deer skulls gathered like teeth in the brush. Beneath the highest peak, Harper found the entrance. It wasn't a cave. It was a wound, a horizontal tear in the earth, lined with animal bones. Inside, the tunnel walls bled moisture that smelled of salt and ash. Symbols followed her, not carved, but formed naturally, as if the rock had always known how to write. The further in she went, the quieter the world became, until she couldn't even hear her own breath. She passed arches made of bones, femurs and ribs arranged in cathedral symmetry, each arch lower than the last. She had to crouch, then crawl. Eventually, she reached a chamber the size of a train station, lit by bioluminescent moss and a central pool of still, black water. Around it were 6 figures. Each turned as she entered. Each wore a face, not masks now, flesh. One held a notebook, hers lost in the mind. Another held the prayer stone. Another bled from the eyes. The 6 stood closest, taller, mouth sewn shut, eyes like burned coal. It stepped forward and opened its hand. Inside was a lung, not bloody, petrified, fossilized. She fell to her knees. It whispered, despite the sewn lips, "You've been breathing me since birth." Harper tried to run, but the chamber curved, folding inward like a throat. She dropped the recorder. The last thing it captured, a scream, then silence, then the sound of breathing. 2 lungs, then 3, then hers alone. 68,000 characters, continuing now. The burning archive. She awoke in a cabin she didn't recognize. Flannel sheets, fire in the hearth, a record playing low static. For a moment, she thought she'd hallucinated the entire thing. Then she saw the walls, covered floor to ceiling in photographs. Her, every stage of her life, every face she'd seen worn by the thing. Some taken from impossible angles, above her bed, behind mirrors, places she'd never noticed. In the center of the room sat a typewriter. On it, a page, hollow chronicle subject. Harper Wynn case, 023 of 243 status. Integrated next, pending. She backed away. Her breath fogged the air. A figure stood behind her reflection in the window. Colton, but wrong. Bent, missing half his jaw. His eyes turned in opposite directions. "You're the new library," he rasped. "Congrats." She ran. Outside, the world twisted. Shelter Hill, the mine, the chapel, Rook's Spine, all arranged in impossible geometry around her, as if the land had rearranged itself into a symbol. She stood at the center, and above her, in the clouds, a word hung on smoke. Namada. Her skin began to crawl, not figuratively, literally. It sloughed, peeled, revealing inscriptions beneath. Stories written in her bones. Names that weren't hers. Screams that had her voice, but no origin. She clutched the prayer stone. It pulsed. One word formed in her mouth. Not English, not known, but true. She screamed it into the sky, and the land cracked. The spell broke. Everything collapsed into ash. The echo still breathes weeks later. A rescue team found an empty cabin near a mine shaft. No one inside, just a single photograph pinned to the door. A woman, Harper, standing in front of a mirror, smiling. But behind the glass, a dozen faces pressed against the surface. Each one of them hers, and one whisper scratched into the photo's back. "We are always watching, because you wore us first."